It's the Dev Friday Show with Mark and Tim.
All right. I think I got the volume right this week. It's a little bit more punchy. I remember I had to actually turn up the volume on my desktop that runs the sound. For some reason, I have that running the sound on the desktop, but everything else runs on the Surface. So we're here.
We're slowly becoming more professional with this. So week by week, little by little.
How's your internet today, Mark?
I don't know, Tim. I just roll out of bed, so I don't know.
It feels like a little.
Is it a little
choppy? But that's okay.
A little bit fuzzy. Okay.
Because it's always better than the recording.
That's true. As long as the audio comes through, which I am recording. I did hit the record. So
did hit the record. Same here. Yeah. Same here.
Yeah. Oh, you know why? I probably shouldn't do this in the middle of the show because we just started here. Because I'm running a VPN, Tim. That may be why.
That could be. Are you gonna un-VPN yourself?
You want to try to do this and see if it'll automatically reconnect?
This will be interesting. So here we go. We are undoing the VPN.
I'm gonna disconnect the VPN. I'm not gonna specify which service I'm using because I want to keep that private.
Right. Nobody needs to know that you're using Nord. And Mark has left, so I am now doing the show by myself. This was unexpected. Hopefully he'll find his way back. I think if I hit this button, he'll come back.
There you go. Look at that.
There you go. Look at that. All it did was take you off for a moment, and I just had to hit the button to bring you back.
It's like the power of the internet. Now, is my quality improved?
Wow, that is so much better. I don't know why we were bouncing your audio all the way over to China and back. That was interesting. But
well, when you're on the dark web, Tim, you got to keep it. You got to keep it down low. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
you gotta, bounce from continent to continent, and make sure you can kind of keep your.
I simultaneously want to know why you had a VPN running, and also am afraid to ask. I just want to go through the list of things that Was it to watch Netflix shows that are only in the UK?
That's an interesting
exercise. Am I close on that one or no?
No. Exercise.
Were you were?
I've been doing it. It started over with always, Tim. Always trade the coins.
Hey, how about that? We haven't talked about cryptocurrency for a while. How's that thing going?
It's still up there, still hovering around 20K. It hasn't died. It's not dead yet.
Hasn't died. Yeah. What was it up to? It was like up to 50. I forget.
Yeah, I would not recommend anyone to get back into it right now. I think with the Fed and inflation with the way it's going, I think it's still going to get rough.
Slump? You don't buy the
slump? No, actually, no, not right now. Because I think because it's interesting when I first got into crypto, it was kind of the whole saying about it was like, oh, it's kind of like gold. It's like it's a hedge against inflation, right?
That was the idea because it is actually a limited asset, right?
And I like that fact. That was kind of like what I was appealing to me. But then over the past couple of years, I guess since with the way that the market's moved, it's been in parallel with the market. So if the market goes up, crypto goes up. If the market goes down, crypto goes down. And also since inflation has gone up, crypto's going down. So it's completely the opposite of what I thought it was going to be.
Gold does not do that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. Gold also took a weird cycle too the past.
It has some weird cycles, but those type of commodities generally don't. They are supposed to be the hedge exactly against that. Mm-hmm. The market goes up, they kind of remain flat. Market goes down, they still. That's the goal, although not always. Yeah. What happens? But so no buying the Bitcoin now. The good news.
I would. What I would do. I would wait till. I think to after the new year. I'm thinking that. I think it's gonna. Well, I think because it's so tied to inflation right now, and I think that with the Fed raising interest rates, it's like every time that happens, the market goes down, and also crypto goes down too. Now, fortunately, crypto has been. I feel that it kind of has a bottom in a sense, but who knows? It could still go down to 18, 15. I don't know, 10. It could. So I'm like I'm talking about BTC or Bitcoin, but then that affects the whole crypto market. But I definitely think after this time where we kind of get out of this inflationary time and the market's kind of crazy about this, then I think absolutely, then buy it. So right now I still use crypto a lot. I love the UDC coin, so the digital coin that's kind of pegged to the dollar.
Okay, right.
I like that for just transferring money back and forth between accounts. So I do a little bit of that. So I do. Commonly, especially when I use my Coinbase card. So I have a Coinbase debit card, which I use, and I get the rewards as I get Bitcoin from that. So I love putting money into that through a UDC and then using that USDC and then using that when I buy stuff. So, But from an investment standpoint,
you're living in the future.
I don't. Yeah, I'm not actively buying any coins right now, other than the UDC, maybe, and then earning some interest in Bitcoin. So.
But the good news is that guy that lost that hard drive that had so many Bitcoin on it in the dump over in England or something like that.
Did he find
no longer lost as much money?
No longer lost. Yeah, it's like.
I mean, it used to be worth.
You feel bad about that, like, hey, it's not worth as much, so why should I care, right?
It used to be a couple billion I lost, but now it's only a couple $100 million. So, whatever. I'm not going to buy that front end loader and dig through it or whatever he was going to do.
But going back about the VPN, because actually this is run into, because I am running a VPN all the time now, because, and actually it works pretty nice. Every time my computer gets booted up, the VPN app gets booted and it connects to the VPN server. I started this over the summer because, like I said, I've been kind of getting back on a privacy kind of kick and being like, I hate everything. I hate everything online. Everything's, just tracking me, coming after me, security wise, and I'm just like, don't like my digital footprint being everywhere. So I turned it on, and I've been noticing too. That's probably also why in some of my classes too, my upload is probably a little bit, because my download actually works pretty well. I don't really see a huge difference when I'm working the download, but yeah, I guess when the upload on the VPN, it does.
Have you done a speed test on it?
Not in a while, so I probably should. I won't do it right now, but yeah, I probably should test it out. Well, also I'm off the VPN. I'm off it right now, so it doesn't really make a difference.
And what I'm seeing here is you have not tweeted since the 3rd. So are you off of social media now? Are you? I was
trying to take a Twitter. Well, I'm totally off Facebook and Instagram.
You've not been on Facebook forever, right?
Yeah. Only when I get dragged back into it by family. But yeah,
family.
For Twitter though, I was kind of like, oh man, it's like Twitter's like a thing where like I love it. I love it. The platform, the idea behind it. I get dragged into it. I vent on it. I'm sarcastic.
You do,
and it puts me and doing it a little bit too much puts me in a little bit too much of a negative headspace. So I have been trying to take a break from it, just for my own sanity and my own like consciousness. So I have just been trying to take a break from it, not totally off, but so I was tempted to tweet something the other day, but I held back. So
how about Mastodon? No, you have a Mastodon account, but
I do have somewhere. It was like free floss, some like open source Mastodon
site one of those servers.
I created an account.
Decentralized thing.
That's cool too, but I don't really use it that much either. But
well, that was a good show. This is what happens.
Got me distracted. Yeah, when you bring your topics, I'm like, okay.
I have nothing. Well, so we were talking about yesterweek. We were talking about in the last show. I talked about my trip to Walmart where the guy was all like, we don't need to card you. You're definitely over whatever age limit is required to buy cold medicine. But I think was it that trip? No, it was a different trip. I had to pick up something else at the pharmacy, and the pharmacist asked about my glasses. He's like, are those, they're supposed to protect your eyes from blue light? I mean, like, yeah, kind of. I mean, that's the idea because I look at a screen all day. And, the gunners also are more shaped to your face, and it's supposed to help you when you don't blink and all that kind of stuff. So I wear gunners when I work on the computer. I actually like them. I think they're maybe not as helpful as they claim to be, but I do like them. I do think they help with the amount of screen time that a developer has to have. But I was curious. Gunners, I mean, their brand is "We are the glasses of gamers." Like that is the vibe that they give.
It's a cool name, yeah.
Now, do you have any of in your esports team? Do you have any students that wear glasses, and do you have any students that wear glasses and wear gunners? Just out of curiosity.
I do not believe so. I don't think I've seen any of my students wear them. I know that when I was getting into the esports, I was at Best Buy, just kind of like walking around and kind of take a look, and they have like a small selection of these blue light glasses and with the gunners there. And I was tempted. I was like, I kind of want to be like Tim. I want to be cool and wear these glasses. I want to be like cool and feel like I'm in the future, right? But then I looked at the price. I was like, no,
I no longer want to be cool.
I can't do it for like a novelty to be like, I want to see if this works. Well, I haven't. Okay, put it this way. Like, I do think it is interesting, the whole blue light aspect of it.
Now, you don't wear glasses though, right?
No, I wear contacts.
Right.
So I do have glasses that if my eyes get dry, I will put them on. But the negative blue light or the limiting the blue light, that is interesting to me, and that's why that's also the reason why I was looking at it too, because I do have sleep issues, like falling asleep. Like once I fall asleep, I'm out, right? But like just getting to bed or falling asleep, that is a big issue with me. So I have been trying to limit screen time before before bed, at least for like an hour or so.
Because phones do the dimming now, right? That's the dimming. Yeah, they change try to change the color of the light.
Yeah. So, but it's interesting though, when I've read these articles online about this, it's kind of mixed. I think blue light is a thing, definitely, but then how much of it does these applications on the screens that changes the color, or the glasses that you're talking about, how much do they really help? Do you find that actually? Like
I believe, I don't think it's like that placebo effect where I think it is because I have them on, but I believe it helps my eyes not feel as fatigued. Now, is that like because they'll even say the reason why all gunners have this kind of wraparound feel and not like a normal flat plane style glass is because they know that when you're looking at the screen, you don't blink as much. When you don't blink as much, your eyes aren't as hydrated. Dry eyes tend to make you, feel like, more eye strain, right? So is it that? Is it the fact that it is a little bit closer and tries to keep the moisture in better than other glasses? I don't know. Is it the fact that it changes the color and I'm not looking at the blue light all the time? Maybe. Honestly, it's like how much blue light am I looking at? If and this is where it goes to probably whatever article you're reading, right? If my monitor can dim itself and put it into, we're not going to show as much blue light, then what's the point? Because I'm running in dark mode all the time anyway. So it's not like I have white light pushing at me. So I don't know. But I think I feel better.
The one thing I have seen from my esports students, they love to pump the accessibility settings on their in the game. So they want to have all the colors as bright as possible.
Oh, like high contrast everything.
Yeah, contrasting as much as possible so that they can see somebody like poke the head around the corner or a gun come around the corner. They can be able to contrast from the background as much as possible. So that's something they like to do, like to pump the settings there.
Yeah, I remember way back. I don't even remember what the game was called. I think it was Delta Force. Way back. They had like the 1 pixel issue. It didn't matter how far away a character was on the screen. It would always be displayed as a darker pixel. And as long as you line the crosshairs up there, as far as the computer is concerned, you hit it. So you could do sniper shots from, unreal low distances because the screen basically blew them up in proportion, right? Because it was a pixel. Way back in the day, back before gaming was cool or whatever it is now. So I
know it's CS:GO thing in the past was like running a 4x3 display
because to make everything bigger.
We're running 4x3 with also running like a widescreen setting, so it would basically stretch. It would stretch the if you run a 4x3 on a wide screen,
right?
It would stretch the display. So back in it's not, if they fix the issue, it's not the issue anymore. But back in CS:GO or Counter-Strike or global Counter-Strike, right? It would actually, in a sense where you're talking about, it would increase the pixels, make the pixels look bigger, right? Just visually, so that people could kind of zone in on that area faster.
You'd have a bigger target, yeah.
Like a wider head.
But fortunately, now that you have to secure boot and have your bootloader and all that stuff, you can't cheat.
I know. I did. And I guess going back to school, I was all tempted to do another Linux switch on my desktop. We're going
yeah.
So I always feel like now it always happens like every week. I feel like, oh man, I remember that 1 or 2 weeks when I was running Linux on the desktop. I was loving it. I was loving the coding experience, the development, and then I realized I can't do anything on Linux except for coding. So if I want to easily run games, and also with all these competitive games, they have these stupid, like you said, like a bootloader, like Valorant has their Vanguard system. They have all these easy anti-cheat systems that you have to install in your systems that are not compatible on Linux. So it's not an easy world that we live in if you want to play games and you want to run free on Linux.
Fortunately, I am a boring developer, and I pretty much just program on my Linux box. So,
and also
I don't have those issues.
and using Unreal, I think I talked to you about that. Like when I was on Linux, I could build Unreal. Like I built Unreal 4 because they don't release they don't release an executable for Linux or even a package, but you could download the source code from GitHub, and then you could just build Linux. I'm sorry, build Linux. You could build Linux. You could build you could build Unreal on Linux, and that was actually a pretty cool experience. It took a while to do it. It took like 30 minutes or so.
Back in the day when we compiled all of our stuff, Mark.
Go through the full process, but then it ran great actually. The Unreal ran great on Linux, and especially if you have a good driver for your graphics card, it worked totally fine. I think I haven't gone back to that because I think Unreal 5, which is the new version, I don't think it's pretty rough on Linux right now, at least from when I was looking at it over the summer. So I don't know. Maybe someday, Tim.
Maybe someday Linux on the desktop for you. Hey, do you do full disk encryption on your? Because you're running Windows, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So do you do full disk encryption?
I do not.
Okay.
Because I always concerned about the speed.
Okay, so I've never turned it on because I've always been like,
yeah.
I mean, I get it. Someone could take my laptop, but I don't use the laptop. My main system is now a desktop. Someone could come into my house, take it, go pop it in a drive, and they could read my data. So yes, I get that. It looks like due to other circumstances, I'm going to have to turn that on. So I'm just curious. I was digging in a little bit to try to figure out how it even works.
If I was going to a foreign country and do some contract work, I would definitely turn it on. But
yes.
But at home and just with my working at the school, and I just get concerned about just speed from the drive readability, read and write ability, and how much. And I don't know. They say it doesn't take that much, but if you're doing a lot of, let's say, what I do is rendering or do a lot of real time, or caching in a sense. How much of that will get affected? I don't know.
I feel like you'd render most of it in memory, and then the I/O to take what was rendered into the disk is not going to be as intensive as the actual rendering. And
since my system, I am running a monster 64 gigs of memory. So how much would it really affect?
You should be able to in memory do most of it, and then just write to the disk, and and you got multi-threads anyway, so.
So you're looking to have to go full disk encryption for something
but I was curious to say. I think the same way you are. I'm like, I know the concept. Okay, we are going to encrypt a drive, but how actually does it work? And I dug around a little bit, and I didn't find any good data because I'm like, is it in the software layer? Is it in the hardware layer? It can't be completely in the hardware layer because you can do it for pretty much any disk. I don't think it's only certain disks support this.
Well, I think to be true encryption, you would have to every time the data would get written to the disk. So if you took your disk or the chip that was that was your SSD card or whatever,
it's got to be encrypted first before it hits it.
Popped it into another computer to read it. It should be encrypted, so you shouldn't be able to read it. Right, so that's the whole idea behind it.
Right. I'm just curious as to some of these motherboards that support, I don't know, whatever it is, secure boot and all that. Are there keys in the board? Do you load the key into something like some chip or some, obviously it's going to be memory that does some of the encryption there. Is it all driven in the C? I'm just curious as to where it is, at what layer this encryption is happening. And I feel, based on a little bit of the poking that I've done, that sometimes it varies. Sometimes it's at a higher level depending on what hardware you're running on. Apparently there's hardware where you can throw in a motherboard that has a header. And it has keys there, so if you take the drive out, it knows that it's not even in the computer it was in before, so it will disable itself even more, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing if you swap computers, you have to take whatever plugs into those headers, like the little hardware key almost, and plug it into your new one. I see you're still raising some cats there.
Yeah, I know the cat's going to have some attention right now.
So I'm just curious about all of that. I'm wondering if I can unlock it. I'm pretty sure I can, based on what some of the other devs on the team have told me. Instead of having to put a passphrase in every time I boot up, I think I can unlock it with my YubiKey, which would be cool. And I feel like you can set backup keys too, which seems super important when you're encrypting your entire disk.
Yeah.
So the thing I'm not excited about is I'm going to have to reinstall everything.
So I know you probably can't go into details, but I'm curious. So this is a security initiative from the company you work for?
Yeah, it's related to that. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So one thing.
Well, that'll definitely be interesting to relay your experience after you do this. So.
Yeah, because like I said, the thing I'm not too excited about is I'm going to have to reinstall everything. But at the same time...
And you are doing this on your Linux box?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's my main.
Yeah, because I know every time I install Pop! OS, they give you the option for, they encourage it. Do you want to do the full disk encryption? I'm like,
I've always been like, no, because I feel like as soon as I do that, it's going to be harder to do anything. Yeah. If it's going to be harder for me to clone a drive and
it's interesting too. The one place I probably would prefer to do it is on my Surface Go laptop, which is my primary laptop that I like to take everywhere with me, which is currently running Windows, but I always get tempted to go back to Pop! OS on that.
Right.
But once again, that is kind of a slower computer, so it's just an i5, and it does have an SSD, but it just feels like a slower.
No one else can hear the cat, Mark.
Like the podcast people can't hear the cat. Jeez. Hey, all our Twitter viewers will love Twitter and YouTube. Will love the scene that just happened with me.
There was a cat
nestling a cat off my desk.
Rewind it. There's a cat, folks.
So yeah, I'm tempted to do it on my laptop because I do think, because if you go to the coffee shop, leave your laptop there. Do you want to, you at least a peace of mind if you lose your laptop, at least nobody's going to be able to dig into it. So, but how does it affect the speed and the reliability of like just reading and writing data? I'm not sure.
Yeah, that was kind of what I was concerned about. So we'll see how that goes. I was curious if you had done it before. So Tim, there's probably somebody listening that's like, you guys have no idea how this works, and everything that you're saying makes absolutely no sense.
I know zero experience with it. I don't want to do it, but
dear listener, you are correct.
So Tim,
yes,
you are my API Tim. So I was thinking about this, and this actually this topic or this what I want to talk about was inspired by another podcast. I won't mention the podcast because they did an episode where they kind of talked about if you wanted to build an API in 2022, what would be kind of the routes to go? What would be your options? Just talk generally about some information. And since I am a full stack ninja and you are the API guy, I thought this kind of would be interesting to kind of talk about, because I have been kind of thinking about this myself, kind of think about, as I'm kind of getting back into some development projects and thinking about what I want to, some side projects, what would be kind of platforms that I would use and what I would work with. What I've been doing now is I love Firebase, right? Because I'm mostly kind of a front end JavaScript guy, and I love the fact that kind of gives you an API for authentication, for doing like a database, cloud storage, right? So it kind of gives you all the main pieces that you need, and it gives you a platform that you could basically build a static app, in a sense. When I say static, like JavaScript, right? So it's not a server side application, and to be able to run it, right? And so once you understand the APIs and with the platform that you're working with, whether it be React or if you're doing something. If you're running a mobile application, because I think that's what it was initially designed for like mobile apps, to make it give you an easy cloud platform to integrate with, to work with. So that's my kind of preferred way. But back in the day, I would love to roll like a LAMP, your Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP, right? Your preferred platform, or in my case now, Python, because I'm getting back into Python too with my play with some object-oriented programming with Python. So I was thinking about you, like Tim, if you could give a developer some suggestions or ideas to kind of get started with a project, and you think what would be kind of a good kind of route to go and to work with the API, or is even the need to have an API, is it really a thing a developer should be focused on when they start off a project?
Wow. So that's a topic for the day.
I know. It's a very broad, general topic, but I was thinking, because we both come from different perspectives. I mostly come from a front-end perspective. You come from like a back-end API perspective. And for me, like I said, I'm kind of thinking about, it'd be kind of fun to like roll up a kind of a small app like I did back in the day with like PHP or Ruby on Rails. I'm not going back to Ruby on Rails, but like but that kind of similar thing, just to kind of get something started, because that was actually a really good developer experience. Having everything kind of contained within kind of one set of code or kind of one platform that you could kind of develop on, and you kind of got comfortable with your database you're working from. But then as you start to put it online, it's a great experience when you're working off your computer. But then once you start to push this online, you just start thinking, okay, where am I going to host the database? Where am I going to host the server side files? Do I need to have some type of distributed system like a CDN for my content, my images, and my other static files? So is that the route to go? Or, what I'm doing now with Firebase, should I just kind of keep going with that?
Those are good questions. And here I was going to talk about the time that I interviewed myself. But
I love this. That's like the mythical topic, which we will eventually get to.
We should get to it one day. It really ties into last week's with Upwork and the Elance fiasco and all that kind of stuff. But all right. So should you continue to just use Firebase? Sure. I'd go with yes. I mean, if that's the thing.
I know, I know. I'm just thinking about what are some other good options, I guess. That's what I'm kind of thinking about. Like, what are some other, because I think Firebase is a great option. I think, using, and also there's also kind of multiple platforms like this. AWS has something similar too.
Yeah.
You could basically have like a Firebase with, and they also offer all the same features like authentication, search. They also, all these kind of API like features you can get from on AWS or other cloud platforms. But I was thinking about if I wanted to scale, let's say if I did release an app on there, if I wanted to scale, my thought of was like, okay, if let's say there's one part of the application I want to build out and maybe take off of Firebase, we could like maybe build like an API for that would be maybe hosted on Google App Engine or some other type of kind of Heroku back in the day, which I don't use that anymore. But it kind of has some type of application type platform that could easily kind of launch an API on to kind of get myself going and then think about how to host the database and scale it up from there. So I do think that is a good approach. But maybe I'm thinking about too is focusing on the API. Maybe that's what I'm going to get to, is focusing on the API when you're starting a project. Is that a good way to go, or is that kind of something you should probably think about a little bit later on?
It's like, I think everything with programming, it really depends, right? Because if you can get away with using something like Firebase, because whatever application you're doing, you're making just needs a place to store data. And in the case of Firebase, maybe you leverage their authentication, right? If that's all you need, because it is very much like you're making a mobile app, and you can get away with that, then yeah, do it, right? Get away with that. Get as much of whatever value you're providing out there as quickly as possible. And leverage something like Firebase, leverage something like, there's other API as a service almost, like, and it's not really API, it's really data storage as a service.
So can you give me an example? Like what company are you thinking about for that?
I'm not. I just know there's other options out there. There've been, right? And you're saying AWS has their own thing. I know they have, and it's a lot of those are focused on you're making a mobile app and you need something to store your data. We will provide the authentication mechanism. We will provide a way to store data. And if you want to manipulate data a little bit, you can upload some JavaScript to it. And then you have server-side things that can do validation. But for the most part, you're shoving data up there, and then you're getting it to the mobile app. So if you're building a game, maybe that works out really well because you have real-time communication through this data store. You're not doing a whole lot of processing because it's all happening on the device, and putting it up into like a Firebase type thing works pretty well. So I guess that's my answer there. If it works for you to use a service like that, do it, right? Now, if it doesn't, and you're saying, no, we have a bunch of things that we need to do on the server side, and then it becomes complex to say, now we've got to somehow shoehorn our logic. Like, hey, we want people to upload an image and, I don't know, it be processed or something. And can you do that with Firebase? Yeah, for sure. I think you can. You could put it up there, then have some JavaScript that reached out to something else to do the processing, and the callback could probably hit a Firebase.
I know that was one thing with AWS, which is really cool. They have a really cool pipeline for doing, like you talk about, image processing and also video processing, which I played with. So if you want to if you want to have a process where a video gets uploaded and then you want to run it through some encoders, they have it all built online, and you can offload all that kind of stuff. That really resource intensive stuff that would take, a good amount of work if you were just doing it on, your own server. So they do offer a lot of those cool features. And
yeah, for sure in the AWS ecosystem, because you have like Lambda functions that you can use in different languages to execute things in a workflow type thing. You have SQS, they're an SNS, they're notification kind of hub sub and queuing systems that pretty much come for free. Not for free, there's usage, but like it's not like I have to also pay for this service. No, you just use it's AWS is all usage basis, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, then you go and say, do I want to be an AWS developer? Is that what I want to? Because then you're saying I'm more of an ops person in the program. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Just realize that you are assembling it out of somebody else's pieces. And when someone says, "Hey, maybe it's time to move off of AWS," you have to say, "I can't." Right? It's tied very hard to what they do.
And I think you hit it right there, because that's why also thinking about for a project, how much is vendor lock-in? How much is that? Should that be a value, or should you focus on that initially with the project? Because that's the other thing great with a LAMP style application. You can move it anywhere, right? You just like spin up another server someplace else and you can move it.
That's the thing.
Switch the DNS and you're good to go.
And we'll get there. We'll get there, right? So this whole serverless, codeless, whatever, everything less that people are talking about really just means leverage somebody else's pre-made environment to do whatever it is you're trying to do. And that it's configuration. That's really what it is. It's configuration and wiring. And if you can get away with it and you can do it and it works well for you, that's great. If you can't, and you say, no, this is really something that it doesn't make sense for us to try to just build, or we're going to use their pieces, but there's enough orchestration that doesn't really fit well. We need to also do some of our own stuff. And I don't want to like use real examples, because as soon as I do that, someone goes, "Oh, you could do that with this," or "You could." Yes, you probably can. But say for whatever reason that you have, you're saying, "Well, I can't really just leverage AWS's suite of services to put it together with a couple glue scripts here and there and Lambda functions here and there to make it all work." It makes much more sense for me just to say, I'm going to store data in a database. Now here's the other thing. You don't need, there are plenty of, if you're talking from a startup mentality, right? I just want to get this thing out. Yeah. There are plenty of places out there that are basically MySQL, Mongo, whatever key value store you want as a service. So you don't have to say, well, how am I going to spin up, a full LAMP stack? I need to have a database that I admin. Okay, we can probably defer and outsource the management of that database to somebody else who's going to do a much better job than I, and I can just be confident that it's there. So maybe I use that. I say, I want a real database because I'm going to be writing, real SQL code, because that's makes sense in my context, in my use case. I want to do that, but I don't have to worry about managing a database server. That's a good win. So I can use another service to give me, and they'll probably run, if I plan on hosting within the AWS ecosystem, probably have an endpoint that is highly performant with AWS or Azure or wherever I'm going to host it. And then you're saying, well, I'm writing code, and this is where I think you're going. I'm writing code locally. I have code that works locally. How do I host it? Do I go out to whatever hosting company and spin up a LAMP server and then figure out how do I deploy? I don't think you do that anymore.
That's also was my experience from a local development experience too, where they do Firebase has its kind of emulator suite, and AWS. I haven't used AWS features in a while, so I'm not sure if they have like an emulator suite that you can install. I'm assuming they do, so you could get a lot of the same features, or to kind of test the features on the computer on your local development station. So that's that. Once you get used to that kind of works. But out of the box, just with especially once you need to install some packages and get some servers running, getting that running locally is so much easier. If you don't have to worry about emulating the platform that you're going to eventually be releasing. I felt it's a little bit better developer experience, or it's just more hurdles you kind of have to jump through to kind of learn about to get it running locally on your computer for just testing or development, to where you could to prepare yourself to eventually get it online.
Yeah, I'm guessing there's probably, if there are more people listening than the 3 people who just wanted to see the cat go by the screen, I'm guessing somebody out there is just saying, why aren't you talking about Docker? And because I'm going to talk about Docker right now. I think if you're in this situation, and whether you're a startup or whether you're an actual, well-positioned company with a suite of applications that are deploying it, on multiple servers, you really need to think about containerization, because then you say, well, I build a container that runs on my local the way I want it to. And then there are services that you can orchestrate the launch of that container, or there are services where you can just say, I want to run the container. Or if you don't even want to play with a service, just boot up an EC2 instance and run your container. It's not perfect, but it works. So if you say, I did this in an interesting way, And no, I'm not going to use the hosted MySQL or SQL or Mongo or Key Value or Cassandra or whoever it is, the most and best data storage system that works only for your application is completely web scale. And I'm not going to use a hosted version. I'm going to run it on my own. Okay. Well, if you're just starting out, then spin up a container for that. Spin up a container for whatever is going to be the web server of your choice. You're going to run a PHP container? Great. You could run a PHP in Apache container, or you could run, I'd probably say a better model is you could run a PHP FPM container and then run an Nginx container that hits your FPM container. And now each one is an individual process, which is what containers were pretty much designed for. So now you have a data container, you have a PHP container to run, your interpreter essentially, and then you have an Nginx container to route pretty much every request, unless you have static requests. Maybe it routes every request to your PHP FPM container, and anything that may be a static asset you can run, just route it to serve the file.
Oh my gosh, it sounds like a lot of work, Tim. A lot of configuration.
Not as much
all
as
those containers,
it is.
trying to manage all these containers.
No, not as much. But here's the thing. Once you have that set up locally, which is always the problem, right? Like you want to say, oh, I want to get local dev up. So installing whatever my database server is, installing PHP, getting Apache configured, I've gone through all that. That is a thing, right? That takes some time and effort. Instead of putting it on your local, where then you have to scratch your head and say, well, why isn't it working? I don't know. Maybe I have to reinstall Apache. I don't know. Maybe I have to reconfigure this. Oh, let's recompile that and figure out why it's not working, or whatever other package I installed, because yes, I ran the npm update and it completely hosed something else on my system. Thank you, npm. Instead of that, you can say, no, I've carefully configured 3 containers that nothing else ever touches. And as soon as I put them online, and yes, I have to wire them together a little bit, but once I have them put online and wire them together, which I would argue the effort in terms of configuration of that is not more than, and very well may be less than, installing them on your local, or installing them on a VM that you made, or installing them on a EC2 or a droplet or wherever you want to host it. I think the effort there is about the same, if not less, to do it with the containers. Then you just figure out, either I'm going to use a service to host my containers, or I'm going to spin up an EC2, a droplet, or whatever, and I'm going to run the containers there. And at that point, no, there is no, oh, how do I upload my files and make them work? No, it just works. Especially if you take a very containerized approach and say, for me, a release isn't somehow uploading a new set of content to my server and saying, oh, now you have the new files. If it's a stateful application, if you're using something that's not interpreted like PHP, I'm going to reboot the server. If it's like a Java web application, or if it's PHP, well, I just load new files in, whatever. Maybe I have to clear the op cache so they actually get evaluated. No, instead of thinking that way, like I deploy files in my code to a server, no, I package up the files in a container. And then I just say, launch that container, because that container has the files. Are you serious? Your cat is now trying to take your mic from you. The cat is like, I need to be on this podcast. I need to talk about containers with Tim.
All right. Getting back.
Then as you scale, that scales as well.
That's right. Okay. Getting back to the scaling, and also the need to think about scaling in the beginning. Because I think everybody would agree that developing an API or building your application on an API is probably the best kind of roadmap for scaling your application, right?
We haven't even talked about that, right? You were just talking about like, how do I get code online?
Well, yeah, I know. But then getting back to the actual need or the development of the API, when should that happen? Should that happen at the very, very, very beginning? Or should it happen, let's just get this together in like a, in a PHP application, even though we might use some fancy MVC coding structure to it to kind of separate the interface from the back end, but we still basically going to be like a single application. We're not going to really worry about having separate APIs to manage different processes.
Like do a whole page refresh. Yeah, we're building the page server side, shipping it down.
Or if you're just doing, or a mix of JavaScript too. If you're doing a primarily a front end JavaScript application but then it has a PHP backend, but then it's still the same application, right?
Instead of split, but even if it's the same application, if you are saying the backend provides data via AJAX requests, essentially XHR requests, then, then you are designing it as an API.
Yeah.
Whether you're calling it that or not, you're designing it that way. If you're doing full page build server side and shipping down to the browser, that's a different style.
Yeah.
It may be a limitation of whatever experience you have. I tend to think that is a more fragile style in the long run, because then when you say I need to do something else, like I need that mobile app, okay, now you need your API. So you have a whole user interface already that is tightly coupled to the server, and now you're saying I have this other user interface, a mobile app, that I want to be, well, I don't want it to be. It has to be decoupled from the server. And that's where people go and say, well, I'm not going to build a mobile app. I'm going to have a mobile-friendly web app. Okay, that's fine too. But you keep kind of bumping up against this. I want something that's decoupled from the server, but I can't get it decoupled from the server. So I'm going to make the server serve something that is perfect for this client. Whether it's instead of a web browser, now a mobile browser. And I feel like, well, there's a better way. And the better way is say, why don't we just decouple it and give us freedom in all platforms to say, I can build for this platform. There's also, from a scalability standpoint, now you can scale in that once there's a contract between the server and the client, well, yeah, you could have another dev build the mobile app. You could have another dev build the front end.
And I guess from a development time standpoint, because the way that, frameworks are designed now, especially if, you're not usually going to be writing everything from scratch, you're going to be using some type of library system or some type of framework, the development time or experience to, let's say what you're talking about, to modulize it from the beginning, it's not too bad.
Probably easier.
Yeah.
Because you're not wrestling with, here's the other thing. What tests are you going to run to say that the front end works fine? You're at that point, you're probably going to be doing, if you want to do automated tests, you're going to be doing full page tests. Well, if you build from an API standpoint, you have some very nice bounds, even looking at the whole application. I can test the API really easily because I'm going to say, if I post this data, I expect a user to be created and I expect to get that data back. That's an automated test that's pretty stinking easy to write. I can say, if I post this, if I ask for this user, I should get back this shape of a response and it should have this data. And I can even test that with the database involved, like in a staging environment where I've created the user, I've set it up, end-to-end test. That's not a difficult test to write. And then from a front-end perspective, I can just say, well, I'm going to fake the API. And I'm going to say, when you make this request to get a user, here's the data you're always going to get back. It's always going to be that data. So what should I see on the page? Well, I can assert a very specific set of data on the page. I can test both of those things in isolation, and they can progress and development on them, and changes don't involve both. Because hey, if I have to change the API, which hopefully it's only an additive change, right? Like we're trying to think about, if we're designing an API, think about it in a way where we can say, let's add data to it, not necessarily take data from it. But if it's an additive change, okay, now there's a new API, there's a new property. Does the front end even care about that yet? Maybe not. So you have I think my opinion is you have better bounds with which you can test different aspects of your application without having to test it end to end from the entire UI. Now you can test it from the UI all the way to the server and back, and those tests can be valuable as well. But those tests tend to be a little bit harder to run, a little bit more fragile, a little bit harder to write. And it just, to me, it feels like you're set up, like you say, for better scaling if you take this approach of let's figure out what the data model is. Let's expose that via an API, and then whatever my client is can do whatever they want with it.
So one other thing I wanted to ask you, where do you, oh my gosh, this cat
is ridiculous.
Oh my gosh. It actually is it's a very sweet kitten, but man, it's like
all over you.
Yeah, I got to take her down. It's crazy.
So
One thing I want to ask you was like, where do you fall on the camps of the good old reliable REST versus the fancy new GraphQL?
They're different things for different purposes.
Well, that's what I want to ask you. What would you prefer one of the other? Actually, I'm curious about, because I think we talked a little bit about GraphQL. I kind of fell in love with it once I learned about, I started to use Gatsby. That's kind of like my first exposure to it, and a little bit with some React applications I was working on, but primarily just Gatsby websites, because that's the GraphQL is built into the platform.
Right.
You're building on that. And I love it. It's a great developer experience. So where do you think you would use GraphQL for the stuff that you do?
So I have to say that the times when I've had to use GraphQL, I hate it. I hate it so hard. I can't stand it.
Well, why do you hate it?
At all?
That's why I'm curious. Like, what's your experience with it, or what do you?
Well, the times that I've had to use GraphQL are from some GitHub endpoints that they don't have a REST API for, and it's just so mind-numbingly ridiculous for me to have to describe the shape that I want, and to get, like, I have to traverse into the tree to figure out the fields to tell them that these are the fields I want returned. And then they have limits, like you can only return 10 of them or something. And it's just give me an API that gives me the structure of the resource that I care about. Stop making me tell you about and if I need to traverse a relationship, let me traverse a relationship. That's not difficult. But I have to, like, traverse the relationships before I even get to them in the world's most hard to understand JSON structured query.
It's structured though. What's wrong with that?
Right, but it's the world's most hard to understand JSON structured query. At least that is my experience speaking.
That's so interesting, because, like, I would agree with you when I first got into it and understanding where's the data I'm looking for, and you have to navigate all these trees, especially when you're using the GraphQL kind of a editor or the console app that you can kind of navigate the data. It does take a little bit to kind of get used to and
I
know.
don't even think that I have that for GitHub though. I'm like reading their docs and trying to find the magic words to put in the query.
I'm curious oh my gosh,
this cat is gonna kill you on the air. What in the world? This is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. This cat.
God. I know. It's like,
I'm sorry for those that are listening. You're
it's
not
just
getting getting the full cat, but
we are just fostering these cats because they're just kittens and they got spayed.
Yeah,
so that's why we're kind of but they are supposedly going back to the cat shelter tomorrow. And whoever gets this cat that's like next to me we're gonna be really happy. This is like the most lovable kitten I've ever seen. It's like, but at the same time, it's like, it's kind of crazy. Okay. All right. No, but yeah, so I could totally understand your experience of, like, not knowing where data is. But maybe, if, like I said, my experience when you work with the GraphQL editor, it actually is a pretty good experience, but you still have to dig through the trees a little bit to understand the structure you need to get to. I did like the fact once I would call, let's say, get some data from the GraphQL and it comes as an object that then I could just basically just iterate on or access the properties of it. Actually, that's a great experience.
See, but that's where, okay, and that's fine because, and I get, for me, GraphQL works very well when you have large sprawling data where the end user is going to have vastly different opinions on how they want it structured. Not how they want to traverse it, but like how they want it structured. And you can even do aggregate functions in GraphQL and say, give me the sum of this and that. So when you're dealing with data like that, I think it can be useful. And it's probably, but a good way to go. But a lot of times we don't care about data like that. And people are saying I shouldn't say people are saying, I get the feeling that there are some advocates of GraphQL just because it allows you to traverse relationships without in the query. And I don't necessarily buy that that's an advantage, because in what we're doing, like if you the other thing is, you say good old fashioned REST or the tried and true REST. There are very few actual RESTful APIs out there. There are many HTTP or web or whatever you want to call it, APIs that leverage the response codes and the protocol of HTTP to communicate the success or failure and different metadata about your API call. but they are HTTP APIs. They are not RESTful APIs. They're not RESTful until you can navigate them without having to construct URIs. That's really the key. And people may disagree with me on this, but RESTful APIs are when you do not need to, from a documentation. And we'll give it I do a whole hour talk on this, which if you want to join me at a conference, we only have 10 minutes left. So I'll give you, but this is actually what I say in the talk. And it's a little bit more than this, but if you have an RPC API, and we all remember those can be delivered. Yeah, those can be delivered over HTTP. Not a problem with that. You can deliver RPC over HTTP. You can deliver it over some TCP. You can deliver it over a local interface. You can from process to process. All that works. Yeah. RPC, when you want to document an RPC API, you have to document the method, basically, the variables, whatever your arguments are, and the return. And you're like, duh, Tim, it's remote procedure call. That's what you have to document when you're calling procedures. Yes, exactly. Now let's take a step back. With an HTTP API, you have to document the shape, okay? The shape of the response. And you have to, in the shape, you have to document the resources.
And when you're saying the shape, you're saying the structure of the text or the content.
Yeah. And we're going to call them resources. Yeah. Right? And you have to communicate the URIs or the identifiers, the URLs that you have to construct. Because what I'm doing in an HTTP API is conveyed by the method. Oh, I want to create. So I'm not calling a method that says create a user. I am posting a pre-agreed upon resource to a user endpoint that I know how to construct because the documentation told me how to construct it. And if I say I want to get user ID 133, I look at the documentation and say we have an agreed upon way to come up with what URI I need to hit to say give me that data. It's very resource focused. That's what a RESTful API is all about. Or sorry, not a REST. That is what a RESTful API is about too. But also an HTTP API is very resource focused. I want to get a thing. Well, how do I know where the thing is? Well, I take the ID and then I look at the docs. The docs tell me I construct it by putting the ID here. Maybe if it's got a couple of them, I need to put my account ID first and then the user ID and then the user's, the identifier of the pet that the user owns because we're building a cat database for Mark. And then I get it all back. So I construct that URL and I get, what do I get back? Not something that I don't know about. I get back a pet resource that I already know this is the data that's in there, right? So we've gone from RPC where I have to document the method itself and the arguments and the output to a more HTTP which says, hey, it's all about resources. I'm going to document the shape, both of your inputs and outputs, because they're not really inputs and outputs. It's more like just things, resources that we're sending each other or you're giving me back. I have to document the shape and I have to document how and where you find them. I have to document the URIs. REST says I only have to document one thing, and that's the shape. Everything else you can find by things that come back in the shape. So I'm going to give you one URL.
Can you get like oh, that's not the protocols, but like if it's going to be like a put or like a get, post, or put, or like is that? But you have to define that too, right?
You don't have to, right? You could do an options on that URL. You could do an options and it tell you what you can post, what you can do. It can tell you which methods you can use. So the protocol itself can let us figure that out. But there's going to be one URI. Like when you're talking about a HTTP API, you have a bunch of what you might call endpoints. Oh, here's the user endpoint. Here's the pet endpoint. Here's this endpoint, that point. And a RESTful API, a truly RESTful API, has a single entry point. This is where you go. And from there, you don't need to know any other URL. The predefined and agreed upon shape, you should be able to determine where you want to go. So I should hit the root of a RESTful API. And if I want to know where the users are, there should be something that tells me traverse to this link to find the users. And if that sounds kind of like what happens when you go to Amazon and start clicking on links, that's because it is. It's just the same concept of hyperlinks telling you where to go when you click on the thing that you have already, in terms of like an e-commerce store, we have a general agreed upon, I understand what orders means. So I'm going to guess that the orders are going to be there. Well, with an API, we're going to be more specific, and we're actually going to document, hey, you're going to have different resources. They're going to be called orders. Want to know where the orders are? Look for the link that has the key orders and follow that. You will get orders, which is probably a collection of individual order resources that we've also agreed upon as to what that is. But you don't have to worry about how to create that link. And that's where I think we miss the point when we go and say, oh, something like GraphQL helps us traverse and navigate these relationships so well. Well, a truly RESTful API also helps you traverse and navigate those relationships that well. Because if I would go and I'd say, oh, give me all the, I'm going to go to the pet database. And I have a user ID because you authenticated and I have your ID, right? Mm-hmm. There should be a link that tells me, follow this link and replace. This is where we have what's called templated links, right? Mm-hmm. Take your user ID, put it here, you'll get Mark. Oh, I get Mark? I want Mark's pets. Well, once I pull back Mark's user resource, on that there should be a link that tells me, oh, if you want to know the pets that this user owns, follow this link. And I can just follow the link to find your pets. I don't have to think about, well, to find the pets, I have to go to the API/pets !user equals this. No, I just keep traversing links.
And one of the, I totally agree with you that then you almost go into the route of saying, GraphQL is trying to solve a problem that either already has been solved.
No, I think GraphQL solves the problem when you have users that want very disparate views of their data.
Or also, one of the nice features about GraphQL too, you can build your structure or your data from multiple sources. So if you have your data coming in from different APIs or different databases or different places, you can kind of bring them together in one structured format. So then you don't have to kind of manage kind of separate or dealing with separate sources or separate APIs.
But then I'm just saying, like, that is not necessarily the common need. Many times your application just needs to give a couple different kinds of resources to the user. And when I start talking about, oh, why don't you just traverse links like REST lets us do, people will be like, well, that's not efficient. Because in GraphQL, I can get it with one request. And I don't know if we have enough time to do this. We'll see if we do. With GraphQL, I can get it with one request, but you're saying that I would have to hit the API, the API entry point, follow the link to figure out how to find users, get Mark's user, follow the link to find the pets, get the collection of pets, follow the link to find the one cat that I'm interested in. Oh, wow, see all those inefficient API requests? Maybe. I mean, caching exists, right, guys? But maybe. But with the GraphQL, I could just construct a monstrosity of a JSON query type thing and kind of feed it and maybe have confidence I got back what I wanted. Sure.
Oh, it's great. It's a beautiful experience.
But the thing that we're kind of unlocking and I'm loving is when we talk about these resources, there's the notion of, well, why couldn't I just embed another resource in a resource? Why couldn't I just say, oh, if you're going to want to get Mark, maybe I should just also embed in the collection of his pets. And our approach we've had, I think, very good success with, and we are basically out of time. So maybe we will talk about this next week. I don't know. But approach that we've had really good success with is saying from a client side, you never even consider that there's anything embedded. You just always traverse links. But the trick is a middleware layer sitting in the browser says every time I see embedded data, I will cache it. So if the server sent me down embedded data that has a URI that says this is it, and then my code tries to go to that URI, I'm going to give you back what I just already had because I cached it. And that unlocks something that I think is really amazing because I can look at the request log of my application and I can see that my mobile app hits a bunch of different things. And then I can optimize the mobile app from the server and say, oh, when you hit this API, a specific client app not all the client apps, but a specific client app hits a specific URI, I know you're going to make 4 other requests that are related, and I'm going to give them to you in the first thing, in that first request, and I can optimize from the server side without having to optimize from the client side.
Well, Tim, I'm glad that I have you because you are my API.
I don't even know what that means. So next week, I don't know what the topic is next week, but we only have 20 seconds left. It should probably be a topic I bring since I never bring the topics, but
somehow I always get you to talk about some things, right?
Who knows? All right. We'll see you in a week, and yeah, until then.
All right. Yeah, I wanted to talk. I read when it says I always keep Hacker News on a side tab as we're doing this show because I'm always just curious what news is breaking.
Really?
And I did see, and I saw. Maybe we'll have to talk about this next week. Is Adobe agrees to buy Figma for $20 billion, and I'm like, oh man, the death of Figma.
You like Figma?
I started using it over the summer because I was looking for an Adobe XD alternative. That is web.
Adobe's like, let's just buy it.
That is like an option that I could use in class because actually they do have a cool kind of free tier that would be totally, for like 1 or 2 projects, for 1 or 2 sketches, and it would be great for students to use for their 1 or 2 projects. So I was going to introduce that and kind of play with that a little bit in my classes, which I probably will still do. But just Adobe, everything they touch, I'm like, it
reminds me of like when Atlassian bought Trello. Because it's like, oh, you don't want to use Jira? Okay, we'll take your little card, to-do list organizer, and we'll own it too. I think they still do.
So maybe
think this is the end of Figma.
I don't know. I want to dig into the story, Tim. Maybe we'll talk about it next week.
All right, I'm going to end the stream.